Thanks for watching, and we hope you enjoy the following presentation.
Hello and welcome to Legalese. My name is Vincent Perryman and I'm a local attorney with the law offices of J. Vincent Perryman. Each month, Legalese focuses on a wide range of legal issues and topics. Today's show covers tax law, specifically the Emergency Economic Stabilization Act of 2008, or the bailout plan that everybody's talking about. With us now is Gus Wilson, a local CPA. Gus, thanks for being on the show. You want to give us a brief overview of what these tax changes are in the bailout?
Sure, Vince. Thanks for having me on the show. As Vince mentioned, this is the bailout. It has huge sweeping ramifications for the economy and the government as a whole. But in order for the bill to pass through Congress and the Senate, what they had to do was essentially tack on a bunch of riders, which meant sweeping tax reforms for both businesses and individuals. The effect of the tax law is huge. It's the biggest tax law that's been promulgated since 2001. And it runs the gamut. You're talking AMT fixes, sales tax deductions, business tax depreciation, disaster relief, so on and so forth. What we'd like to do, I guess, is maybe talk about the financial bailout first, and then maybe move into the effects on individual tax returns and business tax returns. I would say that anything that we say here would be advice only, but if you need additional clarification, we would definitely urge you to seek tax professionals or lawyers for help in interpreting the law.
All right. Well, Gus, you mentioned talking about the Financial Markets Rescue Plan. You want to go into more detail with what that is exactly?
Right. The Financial Market Rescue Plan does entail quite a bit of things that are outside the providence of tax law and individual. There's not a lot of effect on individual tax returns or business tax returns. Most people will not really see any change. It'll be business as usual. Maybe credit will get a little bit tighter. But there are three major tax effects that the bailout did perform. The first of those is executive compensation. The terminology here is a TARP, which is a Troubled Asset Relief Program. That means if a company has assets and they are in trouble, if they've got bad loans, the government will come in and buy them, in a sense, bail them out, as the case may be. The government will come in and either directly purchase those or they will buy them through auction. So if you are a TARP member or participating in a TARP program, the government will in effect limit the salary of key officers of that company. So if the government directly purchased the assets, they dictate how much the CEO can make. So I think that what you'll find in the banking industry especially is that the days of outrageous million-dollar salaries for executives has been ended. The companies that are voluntarily complying with the bailout plan, which is the first wave, they can set their own salaries, but there are certain deductibility limits that have been in place for the past few years anyway. The second thrust would be the Fannie and Freddie stock purchases. Essentially, it's very small. It affects only a small group of people. The community banks and other organizations that qualify are allowed to deduct capital gain losses through the Federal and Freddie stock that they own against ordinary income, which means that instead of having to wait until they had capital gains to offset those losses, they can take them in the current year against any kind of gain that they would make. And then the final item would be the extended exclusion for homeowners for mortgage. In a nutshell, what that means is that if you default on a loan and the government has, or not the government, but the bank has to take over the loan and then liquidate the house to cover the loan, if there was a gap between how much you owed and how much they collected on the house, in the past that would have been income to you. Now it's recognized as just it's gone. You don't have to pay tax on the difference. And that actually has been in place for the past couple of years. The government, all they did was just extend it. And so that's essentially the three major tax thrusts of the bailout plan. Like I said, there's huge sweeping changes for banks, but for individuals and for businesses, it's those three.
Okay, and that the gap there on the mortgage and everything, with that was extended, I think, was it through 2012?
That is correct. It was set to expire at the end of 2009. It will go through 2012. So what that means for individuals is that if they're having trouble making ends meet and paying for their house, they can foreclose without any negative consequences as far as income tax goes. You know, when the bank comes in and liquidates the house and takes over the mortgage, I'm sure there will be impact on their credit, but that's neither here nor there.
Okay, yeah, and I guess some of the additional provisions in there for folks to qualify, because that's something that always needs to be talked about, and questions we get about that in my office are that it's got to be your primary residence and it's only up to $1 million in value. If you fall outside of that, yeah, you don't get the advantage of that. So as far as with the bailout plan, what were some of the tax provisions for the individuals, specifically the AMT patch?
You hear AMT thrown about a lot, and a lot of people don't really understand what it is. The very first thing I'd like to say about it is that it's very complex, and if you think you do fall into AMT, you probably need to consult with a tax advisor or lawyer as soon as possible. AMT in a nutshell is essentially called alternative minimum tax. And what it was set to do was to provide high income taxpayers to prevent them from avoiding paying any tax. There was a floor that they had to pay, and the AMT would kick in and pick it up. There's some add backs, there's some stuff that you're not allowed to deduct when you're recalculating AMT. It's very, very difficult to do. But in a nutshell, what happened was that they found that a lot of these add backs for calculating AMT were affecting what's termed middle income taxpayers who really don't have the wherewithal to pay the tax. And so what the bailout package did do for these middle income taxpayers is raise the threshold for the AMT. I think the numbers are, if you're married filing jointly, you won't be subject to the AMT on the first $70,000, give or take. It's actually $69,950. If you're single, it'll be $46,200, and if you're married filing separately, it'll be $34,975. But once again, I would urge you, if you think that if you are in an AMT tax situation, to immediately consult with a tax advisor or tax professional, just to ensure that you've taken the proper steps and done the proper tax planning to round out the year with.
Okay. Yeah, for those of us, there's probably some people out here going, AMT, what is that? That's the alternative minimum tax, and it basically kicks in, and what it does is you pay a different rate